DevOps drops. Avaya is making an exit. Agent-to-agent testing. Have you been owned by Typhoons? DocumentDB has been documented. Apple's got an army of bots, and we're going to be taking a closer look at the company behind Zelle getting sued in this week's episode of The Rundown. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tech Field Day Rundown. Today is September the 3rd. That's right, folks, we made it into September. Congratulations to everyone, especially those of you who are listening to this, which means you did make it into September. And we are very happy to have you joining us on National Bowling League Day. I hope that you have your bowling shirts ready to go, because we definitely have everything ready to go on our side. And joining me, of course, is my co-host, Mr. Alastair Cooke. Al, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom, and it is a pleasure to be here with my fellow bearded man on National Beard Day as well. Although I'm not quite sure about the National Turkey Vulture Day. I don't think that quite suits either of us.
You know, it's funny. Invariably, there's going to be something that's going to be a weird day, and we're going to dig it up. But what's not weird is the news, right? Because there's so much fun stuff going on out there that we definitely wanted to share a lot of it with you, and we're very happy that you are getting your news fix from us. So we're going to go ahead and kick it off with some DevOps news, because in the first half of 2025, major DevOps platforms like GitHub, GitLab, Azure DevOps, and Jira faced a surge in outages and security issues. For example, GitHub had a 58% increase in disruptions. Azure's had a week-long slowdown. There was a data breach over at GitLab, and how could we forget that Jira has been down nearly 100 days in total so far? These problems show that keeping DevOps tools reliable now requires a lot more cybersecurity, much better monitoring, and faster recovery plans to help protect developers and businesses. Al, do you think that DevOps needs to be more reliable because we've become so reliant upon it?
I think there's a few things to unpack in here. Always when you look at a study, look at who commissioned the study and whether there was some sort of bias in how that comes out. And so Git Protect is the organization that put this study together, and I have not dug into exactly who they are and what their agenda is, but I hadn't really heard a lot of noise about unreliability of DevOps platforms. However, clearly there's been some problems along the way. And I think it reflects some of the shifts in these platforms that are delivering the DevOps services. We have this idea of we're going to consume services to deliver DevOps within our organization. Often, these are cloud services, and so any outage is very visible in these cloud services. And absolutely, we seem to have had some significant issues. I'm not sure developers are too concerned about having fewer Jira tickets turning up. Being able to resolve their outstanding bugs rather than triaging tickets is probably a good thing for them. Maybe not so good for business. But yes, there's definitely an exposure point here. And whilst we're seeing this sort of increase in outages for Azure DevOps, for GitLab and Jira, I'm not sure that the issue here is necessarily that these services are particularly unreliable, or just that there's such a breadth of things underlying each of these services, that sea of complexity. And this is one of the things that we need to understand as we're building applications using DevOps and using the DevOps tools that are built in similar ways. You have to still have some higher level coordination, some enterprise architecture, some application architecture that oversees all of these fragmented microservices. Because individually, they're not actually useful. It's only when they're brought together into a collection. And so that shift away from thinking we focus on the monolith, which naturally brings us to look at the overall view and view it as an entire system that has to deliver something. When we shift to a microservices architecture, each microservices team has a very small view. And getting that governance across of what are we trying to achieve over the whole application? How do we achieve stability and reliability across the whole application is vital. I'd be interested to see whether it's just these public cloud platforms that are delivering mixed results, whether on-premises DevOps tools, because not all DevOps tools have to run in the cloud. You can run these things on-premises. I'd be interested to see how those play. And of course, as a trainer who used to teach AWS DevOps courses, I'm interested to see that there were no AWS services in there. I don't believe AWS services are immune for outages. Unified comms company Avaya has been sailing through some rough seas of late. Last week, they offered voluntary exit packages to all of their employees in an effort to reduce headcount and increase profitability. This comes after a round of layoffs and a second bankruptcy filing. Avaya sold off much of their portfolio over the past few years, according to reports, has been leaning heavily on their partners for innovation. Customers are starting to ask questions about the stability of the company, which has led them to leave for other companies. Of that death spiral for Avaya, Tom?
Boy, I hope not, because Avaya really is one of the last pure play unified communications companies that's still left out there. In the interest of fairness, we all have to admit that the pandemic probably didn't do them any favors. Because when's the last time you picked up your office telephone? Most people, if they need to have a business call, reach for a unified comms video platform now. Zoom, WebEx, Teams, GoToMeeting. Yeah, I was kidding on that last one. They've picked their particular flavor of what they're going to use. Or you use your cell phone. And this is something my friend Greg Farrow at the Packet Pushers has said for a number of years. Most users, especially the ones that are just entering the workforce, don't care about an office phone. They spend more of their time with their mobile device. And when your bread and butter is phone systems, integration of phone systems, software to integrate phone systems, that move away from those platforms can cause huge problems for you and your team. And that was reflected in the fact that not only did they have a round of layoffs, which our heart goes out to those people who are affected, but they offered a voluntary separation package to, I think, pretty much all of the employees there. That should be the handwriting on the wall. We want you to step away, take what you can now, and move along. They know they're not going to lose everyone. That's just the way these things work. Not everybody can step away from this with, a 3-month off ramp or what have you. Their hope is that they can get enough people to take it where they can get their labor costs down, because that has become the name of the game in Silicon Valley now. Is I need to reduce my labor costs as much as possible, because mythically out there somewhere, AI will eventually be able to do all of this. I think maybe. But I think more importantly, the question we should be asking is, how much longer can Avaya stay in this game before somebody decides to buy what's left of their assets in the unified comm space and do some kind of an integration? Honestly, I could see a company really coming in and saying, we're going to buy you, we're going to integrate you with the systems that you have with some kind of video conferencing platform, and that's a done deal. And then Avaya ceases to be a company and just becomes a brand under somebody else's flag. I hope that that's a good exit for them, because I really don't see any other thing that doesn't involve a lot of teeth gnashing and a lot of pink slips at this point. LambdaTest has launched a private beta of their agent-to-agent testing, and it's the first platform that is built to test and validate AI agents. Traditional testing struggles with AI agent unpredictable behavior, but LambdaTest uses multiple AI agents to simulate real-world scenarios, check the conversations that are happening for tone, reasoning, and biases, and then generate tests from the text, audio, images, and video involved with everything. Integrated with its HyperExecute cloud, the platform speeds up testing by up to 70%, increases coverage 5 to 10-fold, and reduces manual QA work, which everybody loves, right? This allows organizations to deploy AI agents more reliably, more efficiently, and most importantly, a lot more safely. Al, do you think getting AI to test our AI agents is a level of recursion that we're ready for?
Well, there's always room for another layer of abstraction and another level of recursion in any system. But my concern is, yes, we're using AI to test AI, and it depends then on the quality of the testing AI to identify the quality of the AI we're building, bearing in mind that the AI agent we're building may well have been built with an AI agent that's helping us to write code. Huh. Um, yeah, where's the human creative in all of this? Well, hopefully that's the thing that we're getting most value out of, the actual creative use of the engineers, the developers who are building this software underneath. Now, LambdaTest has a whole suite of different tools for software testing, and this is just another aspect of their software testing. My expectation is that this is driven by their customers giving them feedback that testing the AI agents is difficult because AI agents, anything that uses a generative AI tool, is non-deterministic in its output. And so you feed it the same data into build one of your AI agent and build five of your AI agent, it's going to give you a different answer. This is just the nature of AI, of generative AI. And so you need some tool that can look at these two answers and say, even though they're not the same text, are they really the same result? And in fact, have we improved the result, which is the vital question? Have we improved the result between version 1 and version 5 of our new AI agent? Uh, that's a tough kind of question to be asking humans to do at scale. And so we definitely want to have some automation. And it does look like some sort of generative AI tool is going to be the most productive way of doing that assessment. Has that non-deterministic result gotten to something that is improved? It's the challenge, of course, will be in training that generative AI agent that is doing the test of the result of your agent. Yeah, these layers of recursion are starting to hurt my head. I think the general answer is yes, we're seeing more generative AI tools being built through development platforms, and we should expect to see this continue. We've covered on the rundown some interesting test results of how productive developers are using these AI tools. The short answer was less than they thought they were. So we'll see whether it may be a enlightenment of agents talking to agents and agents testing agents over time. We've been talking about the Salt Typhoon intrusion for a while now, and it's the gift that keeps on taking. According to the FBI, it's almost certain that your data has been stolen by the state hacked. According to the FBI, it's almost certain that your data has been stolen by this state-backed group. Salt Typhoon's been operating since at least 2019 and has compromised at least 200 American companies and organizations. Salt Typhoon's also been able to locate mobile devices and monitor internet usage, as well as recording phone calls from high-value targets. This is pretty sophisticated stuff. The connection to the state, Chinese state, was also highlighted because entities associated with various Typhoon groups have provided information to the Ministry of State Security and the People's Liberation Army. Salt Typhoon seems to be something you could spend all of your time on, Tom. Have you spent a lot of time looking at this week?
No, but they've spent a lot of time looking at my stuff, evidently. This was a bombshell report from the FBI basically saying, assume that you've been hacked at this point. And I can see why. And this is one of the things that I was worried about when we first started covering this story. Salt Typhoon got embedded in telco providers. And that is kind of like the worst case scenario. Because as we've seen recently with other news of people with grande huevos or huevos grande, depending on how you look at it, once you have physical access or effective physical access to a device, you have owned that device completely. And that's the ultimate goal for a group like Salt Typhoon, is to get some kind of embedded persistent access to these devices that require, that have a lot of data that flow through them. And that require a massive amount of effort to get rid of the software that's on it. I mean, yes, the big thing that was dropped last year of how they potentially recorded conversations from political candidates and things like that. Yeah, that was big for an election year here in the US. But the fact that they now have pretty much everything else that they could possibly want or have access to, that's the bigger problem. If they can do phone geolocation, then they can pretty much nail down a group of specific targets to a location and track things. If you don't think that that's important, remember that there have been generals in other countries that have been assassinated for uploading workout maps to Strava. The fact that people who have uploaded their Fitbits to certain cloud-based services have bullseyed secret military bases that we weren't supposed to know about because they track how many steps they take around a thing in the middle of nowhere on a daily basis. Do you see why this metadata could be important and why a company that has basically unfettered access can do that? We've all seen those spam messages that we've gotten about, I got secret access to your webcam and I see everything you do and send me 0.01 Bitcoin to make this go away. Well, now imagine if it was a state-sponsored activity that they uploaded and just basically decided to put somebody on blast. What if they wanted to ruin the career of a potential political candidate or any one of these things, right? Like, that's the ultimate thing that you have to be thinking about here. I don't know what we're ever going to see come out of the Salt Typhoon thing. The biggest hope is that we can get them out of these networks, block whatever access they were using to get in, and hope that whatever they stole was not sensitive enough to come back to bite us in the future. But I think the reality of things is that we will never know how much they got or how critical it is until they decide to deploy it at the dramatically appropriate moment. And that could cause some massive issues down the road. So good luck to everybody out there because, now it sounds super scary. The Linux Foundation has added DocumentDB, which is a PostgreSQL open source document database, to its projects under an MIT license, which is aiming to create a standardized NoSQL platform. This is backed by major companies like AWS, Google, and Microsoft. DocumentDB combines MongoDB compatibility with Postgres reliability, offering more flexibility and reducing vendor lock-in. While full MongoDB compatibility is still a work in progress, the project focuses on portability, developer choice, and supporting, you guessed it, AI era workloads. Uh, what do you think about this, Al? Is this just another database that I have to choose from in the magical wheel of databases, or is there some real progress being made here?
I think there's a big chunk of confusion on the name DocumentDB here, and I want to address that part first. Because AWS has a service called DocumentDB with MongoDB compatibility. This DocumentDB ain't that. Even though AWS is part of the group of companies that are doing this DocumentDB, this one is more coming from a little bit of the Microsoft side for some of the development in here, but it's a set of extensions to Postgres that make it a non-relational or NoSQL querying standard. And the point here is to have something that is in the Linux Foundation that is not tied to a interesting licensing change. And the background on that one is MongoDB changed their licensing to prevent AWS and other cloud companies from building a product using the MongoDB code. My understanding is the AWS DocumentDB uses the MongoDB code from before that licensing change, and so is not based on Postgres. This new one is based on Postgres, is in the Linux Foundation, supported by a bunch of other companies as well. So it's not just one company pushing it up. AWS, Google, Microsoft, Cockroach Labs, and Gigabyte, amongst others, are involved in this effort to have a standardized document database tool available. It's a good thing. It is going to be beneficial if we see a standard kind of database that you can use across multiple different platforms. They're talking about this as being as standardized as using SQL. So writing a SQL application where your application code only needs to be able to talk SQL, and then there's a layer between that, a SQL driver layer between that and whichever database vendor you're using. That's the kind of approach they're looking for here, although it is actually the database engine that's being released in here rather than an abstraction layer. I think this is a pretty cool thing. I think we will see more development of this, and it will be interesting to see what AWS calls their open DocumentDB service that isn't their current DocumentDB service. If you follow Corey Quinn's last week in AWS, you'll know that naming of products at AWS is an interesting challenge all unto itself and doesn't necessarily follow any sense. There's some really interesting elements in this DocumentDB version, particularly support for ACID consistency, which is not something we'd normally see in a NoSQL database. That's a very important thing, particularly for enterprise organizations, where all of your application developers come from a background of having SQL and ACID consistency, and you start talking to them about eventual consistency, and they get terrified. Larger goal, full compatibility with MongoDB. Further down the track, there's some tendencies for Mongo themselves to take you to court when you get too close to compatibility with newer features in MongoDB, so there'll be some challenges there. But I think the expectation is that this will be a product we'll use rather than MongoDB, since that more restrictive licensing of Mongo. Apple's preparing a big AI hardware push. Tabletop robot with smarter Siri coming in 2027, a smarter speaker, full screen on your smart speaker. That might make it a different kind of device. And new home security cameras. These devices will run a new operating system, just as they've unified their other operating systems, and tie into Apple's ecosystem. Critics warn that the products are kind of late and may not have any unique features. Might struggle to complete unless Apple can deliver something truly new. And I think, Tom, you'd love to have something truly new in your Apple hardware state.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I say this as I type this on an Apple keyboard connected to a MacBook Pro right next to my iPad, and my iPhone's charging here in the corner. And can't help but think to myself how Apple was late to the phone game, and late to the tablet game. Oh, wait, no, they created that one. Laptop game. They kind of really pioneered that system too. Um, Quick show of hands for everybody out there in the audience. How many of you went out and bought the iPhone 16 because it ran Apple Intelligence? You leave a comment. Just leave your hand raised. Um, Now, quick question for all of you who are leaving the other kind of comment. Before you finish typing, how many of you went and bought the new Galaxy phone because of its AI features? Same number? More? Less? I mean, yes, friend of the show, Stephen Dickens, definitely went out and bought the new Samsung Galaxy phone or the Nexus phone. I forget which one it was, because it had all these enhanced AI features. How about the rest of you? Was that the break point for you? Like the choice between these two new handsets was all of the AI features that one did or didn't have? Or was it that you just wanted to get a new phone and this one had a new button on it and they'll figure out the software in a little bit? Nobody buys these devices for the promise of what they're going to have, right? We know what Apple's ecosystem is going to look like in the fall based on what they announce in June at WWDC. The hardware to support the software that they're developing is what's usually announced. And yeah, we know what we're going to expect: a slightly faster horse that eats a little less hay, or in this case, a slightly faster chip that consumes a little less power, possibly a slightly thinner device. If we get a HomePod that has a screen on it, great. But does it need to run AI? I think that this is where we're starting to get into a little bit of a catch-22. Is they're claiming that the hardware needs to be powerful enough to run all these new AI features, but they can't tell us what AI needs to do. It needs to be different. It needs to be unique. It needs to be transformative. When has that ever happened in Apple's ecosystem? Yeah, it has happened. The iPhone transformed the way that phones work. The iPad transformed the way that people do compute. But they were not revolutionary and groundbreaking when they were released. In fact, I can still specifically remember when the iPad came out and people were like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. It doesn't have a keyboard. Well, who would ever use this? Like, there's no reason for me to ever, oh, wait, now I get it. Because it didn't transform the way that people use their laptops. It gave people access to a form factor of a system that was between a phone and a laptop, because we didn't have that at the time. And I can tell you that because I just got done watching the very first Mission Impossible movie, the one from 30 years ago. And it was quaint to see those Mac or the Apple PowerBooks and all of the stuff that was going on. And then go watch the new one. Go watch Final Reckoning. They never take out a laptop. Everything is done on tablets or something else. That future tech that you're so crazy about in these new shows. Everything revolves around these ideas of what these devices are going to be doing, whether or not they're running AI. I promise you something. We are, as we're recording of this, we're a week away from seeing whatever the new iPhone looks like. I don't think Apple Intelligence is going to move the needle on that phone much at all, because the people who bought into the ecosystem for Apple Intelligence last year are still bought into it for whatever Apple Intelligence is going to look like this year. But the people who are just buying a slightly newer phone are not going to care one way or the other. So, to all the critics out there that say that this is Apple's make or break moment, and if they don't have good AI features and do things, then I need you to write down the 5 AI features you need an iPhone to do before you'll switch to one. And I'm sure I'll be waiting next year to get that full list. All right, Al, we had a closer look story that we wanted to take a glance at because it could involve a big, massive cybersecurity incident in the making. Now, we all probably know the name of New York Attorney General Letitia James, but she's filed a lawsuit against Zelle's parent company, which is known as Early Warning Services. That doesn't sound ominous at all. She is accusing it of failing to protect customers from widespread fraud that cost victims over $1 billion, billion with a B, between 2017 and 2023. The suit claims that early warning systems ignored known vulnerabilities and failed to enforce anti-fraud rules on its partner banks. Experts say that the case raises major questions about the responsibilities of real-time payment platforms, as well as highlighting the need for stronger security, identity verification, and frankly, consumer education. A victory for New York could result in everyone's favorite fines and possibly some mandated reforms, but the bigger question is whether or not consumers will see meaningful change or restitution from all of this fraud. Now, Al, I don't know if Zelle is a huge payment platform down under, but I'm sure you guys have payment processors that you like to use down there and this instant back and forth. Are you seeing a lot of fraud or potential problems with that?
So payment fraud for particularly instant payments is absolutely a thing. We have regular television ads here from a couple of our major banks talking about being aware of fraudulent activity, people trying to do social engineering, because these attacks are generally social engineering attacks to get you to give them enough information that they can then institute a transfer out of your account. Absolutely, that is a routine piece of education. The banking industry in New Zealand works a little bit differently to the United States. We are, for a start, a much smaller country, and so it's much easier for us to have a central clearing place, and we've had that for a while in a way that the US doesn't seem to have. So Zelle seems to be very widely used in the US to transfer money between individuals or between individuals and organizations, and uh, clearly a place that is ripe as a target for fraud, in the same way any other instant payment platform is. We saw fraud going back, PayPal fraud going back 10, 15 years. And so this is nothing new that the fraud is going on. The challenge, of course, is that we have more of those mobile devices that can be engineered on, more of the capabilities to be constantly connected and therefore constantly at risk, and also increased use of these instant payments because people just don't send checks in the post the way that they did back when I had hair on the top. Uh, Times have changed. And yeah, this is going to be an interesting test case for who has what level of responsibility in the path through these payments. Whether there is a requirement for due diligence on the part of Zelle and their partners to make sure that this isn't a fraudulent transaction, rather than leaving the penalty entirely on the consumer at the end. I know there tends to be legislation around this. I know there is in New Zealand around if the individual customer has behaved in good faith and sensibly, they're usually found to be the ones who should carry the loss rather than the transfer company. But if the transfer company has not acted in good faith with due diligence, then they should have some responsibility. Tom, do you use a lot of transfer systems in your life? Do you have multiple of these things set up on your phone?
I have them set up because I kind of have to for certain things, but I actually don't use them very much at all. Like I went to buy something the other day that the person selling it was like, "Oh, well, you can just Cash App me the money," and I actually had to dig out my password because I never log into Cash App. People are like, "Oh, well, why don't you Venmo me this or why don't you do that?" You notice that these are all brands, right? Cash App, Venmo, PayPal Money, Apple Pay, whatever. You know who wasn't getting a bite out of that apple? The banks. And that's why Zelle exists, folks. Zelle is the bank industry trying to get in on the micropayment, peer-to-peer payment system. Because like you said, nobody sends checks anymore. The holy grail is to be able to tap your phone together and transfer that money back and forth. There's very little like physical money transfer happening anymore. Like I just finished working a football game here in Norman, Oklahoma, and the entire stadium is cashless. They will not take cash. If you show up with it, like if you have cash in your pocket, you have to go to a machine and transfer that cash into like a debit card or some kind of payment card and then use it. So why was Zelle so particularly egregious here? One of the things that makes people pick one payment processor over the other is friction. Lower friction means more likely to pick that one. PayPal for the longest time was the lowest friction option because everybody had a PayPal account. And then Zelle came along. I'm sorry, not Zelle. Venmo came along, and Venmo reduced friction as well. My wife takes payments for her tutoring through Venmo, and Venmo sent her a debit card. It's like you don't even have to transfer money back and forth; just pay directly with your card. And it's driving the banks nuts because not only do they not get any of that money, they can't, it's not stored in their bank system, which means they can't loan it out and can't earn interest on it, but they don't get the transaction fees because it's the other part of it is all those transaction fees are avoiding the banking system. So they created Zelle and they made it as low friction as possible. How low friction? Basically, you had a Zelle account, whether you realized it or not. If you were working for one of the major partners of Zelle, they had already pre-provisioned you a Zelle account or enabled it. So all you had to do was call in and do that. And this is the fraud that Letitia James is talking about, because it did not take any verification system or minimal verification at all for me to call a bank with an account number and some kind of identifying information and set up a Zelle account. And then it goes to the app, and then I redirect that to a different account somewhere. And then I start using your legitimate bank account and Zelle information to transfer money all over the place. And not only is it invisible, you may not even know you have a Zelle account, but then nobody can trace it. And so when the fraud comes back, it comes back to my bank account because that's where it was attached to. And now I'm fighting charges that I didn't even know I had. And that's the problem. If you create a low friction environment with no checks and balances, then what ultimately ends up happening is that people are going to defraud it, because I don't know if you know this or not about human beings, Alastair, but they're always looking for a shortcut, especially if it means I can get rich from it. And so that's the problem that people are dealing with, is they found the get rich quick scheme and they're going to ride this sucker into the sunset. And so what ends up happening is that people like me are left out in the cold. And by the way, I did check. I had no intention of using Zelle ever, but I still checked to make sure that my bank account had a Zelle whatever so that I could set it up, set up my passwords and everything, and then shut it off. It didn't, because my bank is a credit union and it wasn't participating in Zelle, which made me feel a little bit better. But I can also tell you that scammers are looking for Zelle. They prefer to use Zelle because the same kinds of transaction protections that places like PayPal and Venmo use don't exist in Zelle, because it's effectively almost like a wire transfer. Once it's gone, it's gone. And so at least with Venmo or PayPal, if they detect that it's a fraudulent transaction, they can claw that money back. Zelle really can't. And so I hope that this at least is a win for the New York Attorney General, because one of the things that we found over the years is that when things happen in New York, because so much business goes through New York, they almost invariably have to change the way that they do things in order to make sure that they're able to do business in the state of New York. And then we just get all the benefits of that. Well, on that note, there is one thing that I know that you can absolutely bank on, electronic or otherwise, and that is the lineup of field day events that we have coming up. And we're really close to the next one. I believe, Al, that's on you.
It is. I have an amazing week next week where I'll be up in Santa Clara for AI Infrastructure Field Day. We'll be live streaming on the 10th and 11th. That's Wednesday and Thursday next week. And we have a packed schedule. We have Mirantis and Broadcom, we have Satera and Rayfay, we have Hammerspace and HPE, as well as having an amazing panel of delegates who are going to be in the room representing you as the viewers and asking the really interesting and challenging questions of our presenters, as always happens at Tech Field Day events. You get a week's break off from Tech Field Day to catch up on everything that you missed for AI Infrastructure Field Day, and then it's back to Silicon Valley for Tom. And you've got Security Field Day.
I do. I've got a great lineup of Security Field Day companies. Check out techfieldday.com for the list, and also check out the delegates while you're there. I will be asking them if they've set up Zelle or other payment processors, and then I'll also be asking them for their secret questions to see if they're paying attention. Then I'm going to take a week off, but I'm coming right back with a special virtual event. We're going to be doing Tech Field Day exclusive with Microsoft Security. They have some big announcements coming up at Microsoft Secure on September the 30th. And the next week, we are going to be diving right into those. We're going to be getting a firsthand account of all the cool stuff that they're working on with Microsoft Sentinel. So make sure that you head over to techfieldday.com to see the lineup and get more information about that. And then, Al, I believe you're back with more.
Indeed, I am. I'm returning October 22nd and 23rd for Cloud Field Day. That should be another awesome event. We've got a HPE and we've got Oxide returning. They're an amazing company. So we have that nice little lineup starting for Cloud Field Day, and we'll be building that out as we get closer and closer to the event. And then Stephen Foskett finishes our October with AI Field Day, October 29th and 30th, and he'll have another great panel of delegates and a great selection of presenting companies. So check out the techfieldday.com site. You'll find details of all of our events, past, present, future events will all be there, and you can see all of the interesting things that we've talked about, and make sure you tune in for the presentations you really care about. Of course, another presentation you really care about is us right here with the Tech Field Day Rundown. We're with you every Wednesday with new episodes. You can see them on your favorite podcast application, or you can catch us on YouTube as well. Of course, if you would rather watch on your streaming device, we are featured in the TechStrong TV app on all of your favorite streaming platforms. And you can often catch us on the TechStrong Gang or other Futurum group programs. We'll be back next Wednesday with all of the IT news that's fit to print or fit to make sarcastic comments about. Until then, for myself and for Tom Hollingsworth, as well as for all of us here at the Tech Field Day team, we're wishing you and yours a great week, and we'll see you on Wednesday.